Hey, welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I'm Steve Smith. How are you all? Well, I don't know if you could be any better than I am. This is a perfect day. I'm sitting on the porch in a rocking chair at the Yellowstone Inn. We're up in Yellowstone, stayed up here last night. Old Faithful is about 100 yards behind you. I was going to turn around and let you see that background out there, but it whited out. Maybe I'll turn you around here for just a second and let you see what's out there. All right. I'm not going to wait for it to go off again. It's not going to go off for another 45 minutes, and I already put one up. I think I already put one up, a video of it that I'll put on Patreon in case you all haven't seen it and want to see it. We stayed up here last night at I don't know whether it's the lodge or the inn. I always get those mixed up, but it's just beautiful. We stayed up here in a cabin just about 200 yards from Old Faithful. Actually, Kelly was able to get up and see it through her window in the morning. We got two cabins. And we're going to be leaving here. We drove through the Tetons yesterday. Beautiful. By the way, I want to give a special thanks before I get into today's topic on what happens if SHTF and it all goes to pot while you're traveling. Very special thanks to Evelyn, who took such good care of us up in Washington, up in Walla Walla, and to Steve and Shelley, who were so nice. They're relatives. I think Steve has he must have ridden every road up here on his motorcycle, because he knows all the prettiest ways, and we found some pretty ways as a result of him. So thank you all. Thanks for having us. Thanks for taking good care of us. And Steve, thanks for your directions on that. You couldn't have been more right. We're headed off here. We're going to be leaving in a little bit, and headed down through Colorado, made a couple more stops, and then headed home in a couple of days. But I wanted to talk about what would happen if everything fell apart while you're away from home. I think it was over on Patreon, one of our commenters made the statement that on one of our travel videos that he didn't like to travel very far from home, with the way everything is, and just in case, what if everything does go to pot? And I agree. I agree with that. It is a trade-off. So I just want to say a few things about that, and I'd love to have you all leave your comments. Let me know how you feel about it and what you do about it, because I know there are some people who have to travel. It's not a choice. One of our nephews is an over-the-road truck driver, and he travels all over the place, And if everything went to pot like what happens in my books, being caught away from home could be a real challenge, shall we say. I should probably start with how we kind of approach, or how I approach it when we take any kind of trip. And most of our trips are just a couple of 100 miles, because the places that we go are just a couple of 100 miles away. One of the first things that I do is I have the kids map out the mileage and tell me how many days it would take to walk back from that, because as I've said before, I judge everything, or I measure pretty much all preparedness for being prepared for everything collapsing, an EMP, a CME, whatever. And there are other things you can throw in there. Well, what if it's not an EMP, and like what happened with Canada the other day? What if all the ATMs go down and all the internet go down? And what if that becomes a permanent thing? So there's all different kinds of issues that we could throw in here if we wanted to make this a 3-hour video, and I don't. But one of the first things that I do when we go out of town is I have the kids say, okay, how many miles? And then, depending on terrain, how long would it take us to walk home? And in most cases, It's about, because I figure at about 10 miles a day with our party. And some people are going to be able to make a lot more than 10 miles a day. But you're going to go as fast as your slowest person. And it's going to depend on, what kind of terrain you're going through and what kind of towns you're going through and, if you have to cross rivers, a whole lot of things. And that's not taking into consideration the human element that you might have to deal with along the way. But anyway, so I say, okay, most places take us 20 days. Well, when we get ready, when we pack, there's a couple things that I always do anytime we go out of town. I always have a handgun for every person in the party who is old enough to operate a handgun. Notice I didn't say everyone above 21 years old. Everyone who's able to participate in the solution of a problem, there's going to be a handgun in there for them. There are reloads, extra magazines, and there is extra ammo for that. Anytime I go beyond about 100 miles or across a river, I always take at least one rifle. Yes, one of those big, bad, black, scary ones, and I will usually have about 10 extra magazines for it, and some extra just boxed ammo for that, because you don't know how long it's going to take you to get back. So then we will always pack enough food to last us a little bit longer. I mean, food that can be carried easily. That can last us a little bit longer than we anticipate it would take us to walk home. Now, that's possible, when we're just a couple of 100 miles away. It is not possible when we are out in, west of the Rockies. And we actually ran out to Seattle yesterday. We weren't meaning to, but there was, Morgan had a friend that she wanted to see out there, and so we went out and met him and saw went downtown, saw the town of Seattle and, the Space Needle and tourist stuff like that. And I always find that interesting because it's all going to be, it's all research for my books. And I like to get eyes on something, before I start writing about it. So anyway, the problem here is we are able to take, the first things, but there's no way. And when I had them figure out how long it would take us to walk back home, well, we're talking at least 8 months. Now that's if everything goes perfectly, because that's taking into consideration distance and terrain, because we're going through several mountains. Going through mountains is no joke, I mean, Jeremiah Johnson and all that kind of stuff. But it is no joke. So you have a number of things to take into consideration there, that if it had happened when we were out on the western side of the mountains, if we were out in Walla Walla or we were in Seattle, you have to make a decision. Do you try to make it home? 8 months would be, that's best, if everything goes well. That's if nobody sprains ankles, if nobody breaks a leg, if nobody gets real sick and you have to stop. And there's no way you're packing 8 months worth of food, which means you're going to have to find a way to survive for 8 months or more months before you get back home, which throws it in. Do you try to get back home, or do you say, well, okay, this is I guess I just find people to hook up with here. Luckily, we have family out there, but that may be your new long-term home. But on the idea that, so those are considerations that everybody makes on their own. I would always want to try to get back home. That's where the mass majority of not only my supplies, but my knowledge is of that area. It doesn't mean you can't make it in a new area. People, the pioneers did it every day, right? But I don't, whatever, who knows what would happen. So 8 months, you take that into consideration. There's no way that you carry 8 months of food. How do you survive? So here comes in, maybe I should complete that thought. Not only is where we live now back there. But and I haven't talked about this, and I've kind of kept it on the down low, but I think I'm going to be talking about it in the future, so I'll just mention it here. Our secondary location is back within about 100 miles of where we live. And that is our next long-term location after where we live. So, when you're going through the mountains, it's not easy to survive in the mountains. There's not a lot of food that you find in the mountains, unless you can shoot a bear or a moose or whatever like that. And that's not that easy. Mountains are more difficult. Many people would rather be in desert than in mountains. Different food sources and different ways to get at them, and everybody has their different opinion on that. We could go on forever on that as well. But I don't like, to put it here, I don't like being this far from home, because first off, I like my home. However, there are beautiful things to see in the world. Now, I'm not crazy, and I'm not going overseas for a while, even though I'd like to show my family Ireland. But there are beautiful things to see in our country. And, if you could just kind of lock yourself down and say, I'm not budging, I'm not leaving, what if everything falls apart? Well, you can, you stand, and I'm talking to myself here, not just you. You stand to miss a lot. I mean, it's just been amazing. This trip has been amazing. The things that we have seen. It's just some of the most beautiful land you could ever imagine. Those of you who live out here, by the way, thanks for everybody who has invited us over for dinner and a cup of coffee and everything like that. And stop by if you're out here. I appreciate that. Maybe I'll give more warning on our next trip, and we can find a way to kind of touch base with some of you all. That would be great. But there are just so many beautiful things, and if you lock yourself down at home, you're gonna miss them. And like I say, I'm talking to myself with that too. So you just gotta weigh those things. Now, yeah, if everything went to hell right now, or before we get back across them, I will feel a lot better when we get on the east side of the Rockies. I will feel that we'll be in pretty good shape to be able to make it home if we get to the east side of the Rockies. Until we get to the east side of the Rockies, I'd say it's a toss-up. It's a real toss-up, and it's sad to say, but I think it would be real optimistic to think that we would all make it back in good shape, if make it back at all. So anyway, those are the things that I think about. Protection, food. I didn't mention, some of these things are just kind of a given. We always have ways to purify water. Every bag that we've got has a Sawyer in it. And I realize this may be this would go too long if I went into incidentals on how we pack, what we pack, everything. I'll do that in a separate one, maybe after we get home. And I'm also going to do another one about vehicles and how we use vehicles and how we pack vehicles and everything like that. Because even when you're, closer to home, if within a couple 100 miles, it can be an issue. If you're trying to get home, you want to get home, and you don't have the same, the world ain't the same, right? So anyway, I'm not sure that I gave any real answers there, except to kind of give you my feelings on it. But that was in response to that our one commenter who said, I don't like to get far away from home. Neither do I. And I'll tell you that right now, my antenna, my awareness is way up there. I'm going to feel a lot better when we get on the other side of the Rockies tomorrow. Anyway, we have a lot more to do up here in Yellowstone today. It's just beautiful. If you haven't been up here and you feel like, it's safe to get away, because that's the other thing, when I say, what if everything collapses? But the other alternative, obviously, of what if everything doesn't, do you want to keep yourself from experiencing so many things? Next year we'll be taking a trip down south through a lot of the the areas where my family first came and actually lived until the middle 1800s. We'll be headed down through Tennessee and up through Kentucky and Virginia and the Carolinas and Georgia and all that. We'll be making that. So, you know, I'm not going to keep myself from making those trips. And to be honest, I will feel a lot better being in the South than I would out here. And the distances out here, if you haven't been out here, you have no concept of distance. Distance is just amazing. I mean, it's unbelievable. You know, I can look over there at the top of a mountain, and it doesn't seem that far away, and it'd take us 3 days to get there, you know. I think. How do I know? I have not walked to the mountain. Anyway, give me your thoughts on it, and give me your thoughts on travel, and give some of us, you know, thoughts about how you pack and what you think, and you know, I'll be real honest. Having contacts along the way, which we did. We didn't have as many out here as we would have if we were back east. Let me put it that way. And yet, as I've said before, that if everything collapsed, I feel much better being west of the Mississippi than east of the Mississippi. And that's simply a matter of population density and things like that. But, you know, that's everybody has their own opinion on that, and everybody should do what they think is right for them. Anyway, I could sit here for the rest of the day, probably the rest of the week, and be happy as long as I didn't run out of coffee. But I'd better get going because the tribe is anxious to get to the next thing, and so am I. And I hope you all have a good day. And remember that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow. We've done the best that we can to prepare for this trip, so if we need to use it, hopefully we'll live well. And hopefully I'll be making these videos again from home base in a couple of days. So you all have a good day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.